So we get started in just a second once these latecomers arrive.
That's a very charitable phrase. I was going to say slackers.
Well, they were in the room already, so it's all right.
And they're not slackers. Very hard.
All right. Sir.
You go right ahead. I'm just I'm going to start.
Okay. So, good morning. This is the Homenet working group. If you're in the wrong room, the rest of them are quite far away, so you should probably start leaving now. I'm Stephen Farrell. This is Barbara. Your chairs. These are your slides. Okay. We should play with this thing and make it do stuff.
You've got the clicker.
Yeah, it's on presentation mode, was it?
It was.
Well, I took it out of.
Take it out?
Probably.
Oh my God.
This is it here?
Hit this thing a few times. It should. Is that working?
There we go. So, no, there we don't go. Yeah, there's no well anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, no well. Oh. This is fun. Okay, this is the agenda. Anybody want to? Oh, that's not the agenda, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the wait. No, well.
We do that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
There's two buttons. Push. Let's just push here. Just keep pushing it till it works.
Plus, you have to press the sort of square in the paint.
This guy over here.
Oh, that one. Right. And then push the button.
That's the other way around. Push 1. And then push 2. Then pause. Just like.
And push that at some point. Dang.
Okay. Okay, there's the agenda. Okay. Anybody want to agenda bash? Oh, the lights came up. You got to wake up now. Okay, so the blue sheets are circulating. We have note takers and Jabber scribes. Thank you. The note takers are working in the Etherpad in case you want to look in. Next is, we should say thank you to Terry for being our esteemed AD. And welcome, Derek. And then we have basically one presentation. Is Daniel here? No. So we have a couple of drafts that Daniel may choose at some point to go to the mic and talk a bit. And other than that, it's the TED show. And then we want to discuss where we want to go from here, because we tried to have this discussion on the list, and the lack of activity was underwhelming. So I think that's a challenge that we have to try and deal with. But first, the TED show.
Okay, so I'm going to try and get it to work maybe on your slides.
So am I supposed to do a song and dance routine, or?
Yeah. It would be helpful. Oh.
You hadn't that planned anyway, no?
No, I haven't rehearsed. Sorry.
I think it may work.
I'm going to touch it up.
All right. So on the agenda it says simple naming and other stuff, and I decided to call this work in progress because I think that what we need to talk about is work in progress. So there are a couple things that I've been working on. One is at the last IETF in Bangkok, I presented a topic about marketing Homenet, like what is the market, and what is the market for things like Homenet routers right now, and how does that compare to what we've been doing here? Is there anything that we've been doing here that would be useful on those routers? Is there anything we can learn from what's actually succeeding in the market right now? And so I wrote up a document that actually talks about that problem in quite a bit of detail and tries to systematically compare what's available on various multi-router home networks to what we've done. And so the document is Draft Lemon Homenet Review. I couldn't really come up with a good title. I didn't want to call it Homenet Marketing Document because I figured nobody would read it, but it's basically a market analysis. And I think it's pretty important because there's no point in us doing this work if there's no market for it, right? Doesn't have to be a huge market, but somebody ought to be benefiting from this, or else we're just kind of standing around wasting our time. So I'd really appreciate it if people could take a look at that document, critique it, suggest things to add to it, and at some point we should probably even consider drawing some conclusions from it. I'm not going to present the document in detail here because I already did that in Bangkok, so you know where to find it. Has anybody actually seen it already? Okay. Sorry about that. I should have actually asked the chairs to put it on the agenda by name. Anyway, so please take a look at that, and let's discuss it on the mailing list. I think there's some good stuff to discuss in there, so hopefully that'll generate some discussion. The next thing that I want to talk about is Homenet and OpenWRT. Let me just go back to my sub-agenda. Oh, yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, so I haven't done any work on the simple naming document since the last IETF because I've spent all of my time working on the stuff that we need to implement simple naming instead. Seemed like a good trade-off. So what I did for today's presentation was to just go through the simple naming document and see, like, where are we? What do we have? And what do we still need to do? And this was actually really instructive. I think as a result of doing that, I have quite a few changes that I'll be making to the document, which I think will improve it substantially and make it a lot easier for people to read it and review it. So it was all good. I'm just going to go through all the sort of headings of the document and talk about what's in there. So the document talks about the various different things that the Homenet needs to provide. Needs to provide a name for the network. We have home.arpa, we can use it, that's done. It needs to provide authority service. So authority service means being able to do a DNS query for stuff that's in home.arpa and get authoritative answers. For the most part, HNCP has the information we need. There are a few things that need to be enhanced about how HNCP derives that information, but for the most part, it's there. But we don't have a way to extract that information from the HNCP's state and put it into an authoritative DNS server. And I don't think we want to make HNCP itself be an authoritative server. We could do that, but that just doesn't seem like the right solution to me. So that's a bit of, we have to figure that out. I mean, whether the way we do it is we just bond the two things together or extract the data. Yeah?
Julius Krobachek, why does it not feel like the right thing? Why using HNCP as the authority?
So I'm one of those people who really regrets that Ubuntu adopted systemd, and I feel like the HNCPD implementations that we currently have tend to go down the systemd rat hole, and that's a design choice that I don't personally like. I'm not saying that the working group should agree with me, but that's just my own personal opinion. So indeed, one of the ways we could solve this problem, and it might be the most expedient way, would be to just, bond a DNS listener onto HNCPD, and that would work. So yeah.
And the other way around?
The other way would be to have
having
HNCP.
a DNS server participate in the HNCP protocol. Does that feel better?
Well, that would be the same thing.
Yeah, essentially, but the feeling would be different.
One of the problems that I have with HNCPD is that all of the things that it knows are contained within it. And so actually seeing what it knows is not easy. And so basically what I'm talking about is that I would like to be able to have that. I'd like to be able to have something that's sort of equivalent to UBus or DBus for talking to HNCPD and getting the information that it has. And if we had that, then that could be used to populate the authoritative server. So we wouldn't need to.
Is your bad feeling about the implementation or about the protocol? The implementation is a detail.
It's about the implementation. This is all about implementation. This is not about like the protocol has a problem. Yeah, no, it's it really is a matter of taste. Like I'm not saying that the way that it's currently implemented is wrong. I'm just saying this is not to my taste. So we can fake up authority for a single router use case, and a lot of the stuff we can do for a single router use case, which is not super interesting, except that it allows us to at least see that the stuff that we're doing actually would work on a link. Trying to figure out what this is on the slide. Oh, right. Yeah, so one of the things that we need to be able to do is choose an authoritative server. If there's an authoritative server, then there needs to be a primary. And that is to say, if there's a stateful authoritative server, then there needs to be a primary. If it's all stateless, then we don't really care. We're just getting the information out of HNCP. Every router will have it. They can all be authoritative for the same zone. We don't care. If there's state, then we need the state to be in a particular place. So if we're going to do that, then we don't currently have support for electing a stateful router in HNCP. I don't anticipate that being difficult, but we need to do it. And then for the stateless case, we need to actually, we're missing some of the stuff that we need to name the perlink subdomains that we would delegate. So reachability, this is the ability to query things on the Homenet from outside of the Homenet. Simple naming doesn't specify a way to do that, so we have full support for this feature at this time. Link naming. I came up with a way to name links that I think is sort of human readable, and it's described in the simple naming architecture. Basically, it takes the name of the router and the name of the links on the router, and if there are two routers with the same name, it gives one of them a different number than the other, and that lets the user sort of see a name that maybe they could figure out what it's referring to. If they can't, it's not the end of the world, but it's better than just like, hex vomit, as Stuart likes to call it. That needs to be added to HNCP. Again, it's exactly the kind of thing that HNCP knows how to do, so I don't think it's hard, but we haven't done it. And of course we can fake this up for the single link, as I was saying previously. But yeah, there's a lot of new work to do here. We need link names because we need to list the browsing domains. We need to list the registration domains. So if you want to do service discovery, you need to know where to do it. And so we need to have a list of all of the domains in which a host on the Homenet needs to do queries in order to discover services throughout the Homenet. Similarly, if the host or if a service is doing service registration protocol, it needs to know who to talk to do that. And thirdly, we actually need delegations. Question at the mic?
Hi, Ted. Yeah, Robin Wilton. To what extent does this depend on good behavior by the vendors? Because, so for example, if I look at the device names on my own normal home routers DHCP list, some of them are ones that I've been able to set. Some of the things are things like an HP printer that has HP at the beginning.
Yep.
And some of them are badly behaved and don't really give me any indication of what they are.
Yeah.
So does this impose requirements essentially on vendors for good behavior?
It specifies what the correct behavior is, and then whether the vendor follows it is up to them. But certainly, I mean, one of the reasons I think that your HP printer is just hex vomit is because they don't have a better thing to do. And so what I tried to do here was suggest a better thing to do. So, sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
Just to, I think because so Daniel, we go. So I think because it's like if you're a router, you plug it and you say, well, if it is not routing properly, so because we have a lot of functions within the same box, we expect it to have a different length. So, I mean, this impacts of that implementation should be limited, I guess. Yeah, it's a bundle of functions, so I guess that's.
So per link authority, again, just going down the subheadings in the document, requires that that we choose a DNSSD proxy for each link. So remember, Homenet routers are talking to each other over shared links, which means that for many of the links in the Homenet, there will be more than one router that could act as the DNSSD proxy. And at present, we don't actually have a way to decide which one of those 2 routers or 3 routers or however many it is actually going to do DNSSD service on the shared link. So we need to add that to HNCP. That's not done or even specified yet. We need the authoritative server or servers to delegate to each link zone. So if HNCP knows which router is going to do service for which link, and we're doing stateless authoritative service, then we would actually have all of the information we needed at that point to set it up. But if we're doing stateful authoritative service, well, we still have all the information, but we need to extract that out of HNCP and put it in the authoritative server. Reverse mapping, this is not hard, but we haven't done anything of it. None of this stuff is done. It's not really that important because in order for reverse mapping to work, hosts need to do something special, which 0 hosts currently will be doing. So this is not a high priority. That's why I said not very important. Also, it's not very important for 2 reasons. 1, it's not a high priority, and 2, nothing's going to break if it's not working, probably, we hope. So, name resolution. So this is, suppose I want to look up a name. I go to port 453 with a query, and what happens? So the resolution for local names using the discovery proxy, I've implemented that, it works, it's great. Resolution for global names, the current discovery proxy will also do recursive resolution, so that works great. There's a gap if so in order to do name resolution, the discovery proxy needs to know which servers to talk to. We're getting that information right now using prefix delegation, and we're sharing it. I think we're sharing it in HNCP. So that information should be available, but there's probably a missing step here to just stuff it somewhere so that the discovery proxy will find it. And an additional loose end. So if we have a bunch of, if we have a stateful authoritative server, then all of the discovery proxies need to point to that when they're resolving names that either they can't resolve themselves or that aren't external. In other words, that are subdomains of home.arpa. And so there's a little bit of glue that hasn't been written to do that. It's not very hard, but that needs to be written.
So Ted?
Yeah.
So question on the previous slide.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming all goes well, at some point the discussion about DNS over HTTPS will land somewhere and might impact on what should be done here. Is that correct?
I mean, that's just now you're just using a different port and a different transport, right? It's not, there's nothing, none of the plumbing changes, I think.
Well, other than you might.
If this were going to do DOE upstream, then we would need different plumbing upstream. If it's going to do DOE downstream, then we need different plumbing downstream. But the actual wiring inside of the thing, I don't think changes. But
just as everybody else, if a client, if a host is doing DOE, and that causes issues somewhere, those same issues will arise here.
Right. So I mean, one of the issues with DOE or with anything where you're tunneling DNS is that you need to have some kind of exception process, or else you're going to tunnel things that can't be answered by an external resolver. So yeah, good point. I think that the document actually says that, but you're right, I didn't mention that here. So that is another loose end that we should talk about or figure out. It kind of falls into the last bullet point there, except that it's on it's something that a host would need to do, and I don't know, like that's not really our bailiwick, right? Like we can't tell people what to put in hosts.
No. And so I think the only point is just that if this work kind of finishes and then we don't want it to not take account of whatever other people are doing with DNS or HTTPS or TLS, right? Yeah. I mean, personally, I would be very tempted to have my Homenet router do dot to some external service and then just use the name resolution on the local link when I'm on that local link because, I trust myself more to set that up than I trust my random IoT device vendor. But anyway, so DNS push. So DNS push exists to give us feature parity with multicast DNS when doing service discovery over DNS. With multicast DNS, you send out a query and you get back answers as they come in, and you retry and maybe you get more answers. And so as answers come in, the MDNS client will add information to the user interface if there's a user interface, or will potentially establish connections to new services, or however it's using this information. The point is that updates will come in as new information arrives. With DNS, typically you just do a query and you get a response, and that's the end of it. But which is actually not ideal. Like it actually causes problems in real operation. So we added the ability to just say, hi, I'd like you to tell me whenever the meaning of this name changes. And that's what DNS push does. And so our discovery proxy does DNS push as a client, as a server. And so if you have a client on the local wire that knows how to do DNS push, it will do it.
Bernie Volz, all these pieces are great, but the question is how do you make sure they all sort of come up automatically, right? Because the DNS discovery proxy stuff and the relay, you got to configure stuff, right? The security associations and stuff like that. So have you looked at that part, how you might do that in this sort of more automated Homenet environment?
Well, so the things that I've been talking about, for example, with HNCP, getting information out of HNCP to name the links and stuff like that, those are all examples of what you're talking about. Basically, we're relying very heavily on HNCP to address that. But
that problem. How does that play with some of the trust stuff you've put into like this stuff? Does it all play pretty well?
So
because it's supposed to be using like TLS and things like that, right?
Right. Yeah. So the answer is right now we haven't actually solved that problem. To do TLS, if we have IPv6, in principle, we can just go use Acme to get TLS certs. And I think I actually mentioned that in the document. But yeah, this is a somewhat hard problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And it would be nice, for example, if browsers had a way to use DNSSEC to sign a cert rather than using PKI, maybe with different security properties. But we don't have that yet, as far as I know. I think it was attempted at one point, and then Google pulled it. So, oh whoa. Round robining. So this is really technical, trivial stuff, but one of the things that the document specifies is that when you're doing DNS resolution, if you have multiple servers, you want to, if one of them isn't working, you try the others. And that's basically working because in our implementation, we're just using MDNS Responder to resolve queries, and MDNS Responder already does that. So that stuff's, at least for the purposes of having something running on OpenWRT, that's done. It's pretty simple. Provisioning domains. I don't know if any of the PVD authors are in the room. Oh, hi. Yeah, of course, because you're now official or semi-official. So we need the PVD-RA option in order to do this. We don't have it yet. It's not. Is it like close to last call, or what's going on with that? Okay. Yeah. So hopefully close to last call. but not currently. So we're basically waiting on that, and that's going to require a fair amount of work to implement. I haven't really looked into this too closely, so this is one of the sort of big-ish unknowns about getting this working on Homenet.
Julius Krobacek again. Could you perhaps describe how you envision that to work? So one thing that I'm worried about is that we've done a lot of work at the HNCP at Babel levels to make sure that Homenet works well with multiple simultaneous ISPs.
Yep.
And all the naming stuff is a little bit worrying because there are some unwritten assumptions in what you've been presenting that there is only one ISP. So the PVD stuff, I understand, is your vision for making sure we can work well with multiple. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that's your vision for making sure it works fine with multiple ISPs. And so perhaps if you could clarify a little bit how that's meant to work.
That's a great question. So there are basically two approaches to handling multiple ISPs. One of them is to use provisioning domains. Ideally, we use provisioning domains. Like if a host supports provisioning domains, we use it. Of course, the number of hosts that currently supports the provisioning domain ARIA option, to the best of my knowledge, is 0. So we can't rely on that. And so all we can really do, we don't really have a way to know how a host is going to use the information that it gets out of DNS. We do have some degree of trust that most modern hosts do happy eyeball style stuff. So if a particular answer from DNS doesn't work with the source address that they choose, they'll try a different source address. And so essentially the way we solve this problem is by deliberately round-robining amongst provisioning domains if we don't have a tag on the...
Happy eyeballs is only the destination address, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, right. The source address
just one source address per destination.
Source address is kind of random. We don't have any control over source address selection. So whatever the host does is what it does. So all we can do is hope that just by trying a bunch of different things, eventually the host chooses a combination of source address and destination that work. We don't have a way to tell it what to do there. I mean, I guess it's possible we could use the DHCP source address selection stuff, but well, this is good. We've got a lot of people coming up to the mic.
But my question, okay.
So Julius, could you go a little closer to the mic?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Perhaps we've misunderstood each other. So what I'm worried about, the layer 3 stuff, I'm familiar with. What I would like to understand is what happens if you have multiple ISPs with multiple DNS servers.
Right.
And of course, you're telling them to have global DNS only. But of course, the DNS servers are not equivalent because ISPs are what they are.
Yeah.
So what happens if my Homenet is connected to 2 ISPs? Right. They have DNS servers. How does the Homenet merge the information from the multiple DNS servers?
Right. So what's going to happen is that the hosts, when a host does a query for a particular name, the answers will be attempted from different. I'm sorry. I'm a little unclear. I can't remember exactly what I wrote in the document. I had a great solution for this problem, which I don't remember. But I think now that you're asking this question, I think what we did is set it up so that there would be more than one IP address that you could do queries from, and so the host round robining would wind up round robining between ISPs rather than round robining between actual distinct DNS servers. So in other words, you would try IP address number 1, and that would get you PVD number 1, and then you try IP address number 2, and that would get you PVD number 2, and in that way you would get more than one answer to the same query, and so if one of them didn't work, you'd get some from other ISPs.
So you're assuming that the host is actually doing round robin between the different DNS servers.
Right. If it's not,
which is not necessarily the case.
Well, I mean, we don't really have a whole lot of control. The only other way that I can think of to do this is to basically have the network do the connection for you and use NAT to make that all happen under the covers, and I think that's a terrible solution. So
yeah, that we can agree about. I think we're in trouble here.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a serious problem, for sure.
Michael Abrahamson. So I'm speaking in V6 Ops on Thursday, and I'm bringing up basically this problem, and I hadn't thought about the multiple DNS resolver angle, and that's an additional problem. This is not a solved problem.
Right.
This is something that we need to work on, and
I mean, this is what MIF was working on until MIF was closed.
Right, exactly, and it's even more than MIF was working on, because we have this huge complication now. DOH is coming along as well. So I mean, we already have the problem with a device having many VPNs, having multiple resolvers, and now all of a sudden you might even connect this VPN to your home router. So the home router now has 5 different uplinks, 5 different resolvers, all begging for your attention to please use me, and we don't have a solution for this.
Right.
I mean, at home I have 4 different VMs running, and each of these are sitting in a separate VPN. Part of the problem is I'm solving this problem by attaching them one by one, because I don't have a PVD solution to do what I need. So yeah, this is something we should. It doesn't necessarily need to be worked on here, because I don't think Homenet can solve it, but it needs to be worked on elsewhere. So if someone, I don't know, should we write a V6 Ops problem statement document on it, or where should that work be done? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm reluctant to do anything in V6 Ops because it's such a big working group and it takes on too much work. So I'm not really thrilled with that proposal. Although
you can submarine it in int area, nobody listens there.
It's the problem is lack of focus in both places. I mean, honestly, I think we have more focus here, except that this room is too small. There are not enough people showing up, so I don't think that's good either. I don't really know what the right solution. I mean, we could try doing it in V6 Ops and then see what happens, and if there's sufficient interest, then we may want to do a short-lived working group that just solves this problem. Eric?
Yeah, Eric Vink. About the PVD, just clarification, but I'm pretty sure you know it anyway. With PVD, with 0 implementation in the host, that's the bad part of it, you get a complete bundle of the address, the next stop, and the DNS resolver, right? So you will always ask the right, I mean, you can ask always the resolver with the right source address, so it solves a lot of problem.
Yeah.
But mostly you know it already.
One other way we can solve the problem, by the way, is so if the host supports that, then I think we have a solution. Problem is if the host doesn't support that, and so if the host doesn't support that, one thing we can do is we can arrange to only send one RA that that can be processed by a host that doesn't support PVDs, and then all of the other RAs will only work if you support PVDs, and then that one you basically wind up single homed if you don't support PVDs. So that's one way of solving the problem. It's not ideal because then you don't get the benefit of multi-homing, but
yeah, and that's exactly what the PVD draft says.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Christian Franke. I'm wondering, maybe I understood this wrong, which machine would be doing the DNS round robin?
So I was being a little bit hypothetical there, and I'm realizing that actually what I proposed in the document is a single RA as opposed to, so in other words, the host wouldn't be doing multiple provisioning domains unless it supports it.
Okay.
And if it is supporting it, then it's not round robining. It's just doing queries.
Okay.
The round robining would be happening inside of the resolver, the local resolver on the Homenet router.
Yeah, okay. Because I just want to point out that round robin of the host usually performs pretty badly if there are resolvers that don't work.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Oh, good discussion. I mean, and also very appropriate. I think this is one of the things that probably requires the most thinking right now. Service registration protocol. So this is basically DNS update with first come first serve naming. Requires there to be a stateful authoritative server. I have code that will take an SRP update. They're sort of specially formed updates, validate it, and then in principle do a DNS update based on it, but that's not actually done. And I've also been talking with Mark Andrews about maybe getting service registration protocol into Bind 9, which would be very cool. We could also do this in MDNS Responder and just have the updates go into the cache. But the bottom line is that we don't have code to do this right now. We don't have working code to do this right now. We're not super far from that, but we don't have it. So that's work that needs to be done if we're going to support SRP on the Homenet. And I think it's worth supporting SRP on the Homenet from the beginning, because if we don't, then vendors aren't going to implement it. You know, why implement something if nothing is going to hear it? So as I said earlier, writing the slide deck really helped me to find a lot of things that I need to change about the document in a very good way. And I think that we have a kind of a punch list of things to go through to get this working on OpenWRT. It's certainly not fully formed yet. As the process continues, I'm sure we'll find new items to put on the punch list, but I think that there is a path to actually getting this working, and I'd like to get it working. I don't know if Dave is in the room. Dave Tate, actually, I was talking to him yesterday, and he threatened to help me with some of this, so that would be great, because right now, basically, I haven't been getting any participation on this. I've been doing this all on my own. Apple's been paying me very kindly to work on it, which is great, but one person doing this is going to be slow. So nevertheless, I'd really like to demo this in Montreal, so we'll see how it goes.
Michael Aronson. Yeah, I think I said last time, if you can package this up for OpenWRT, I'll volunteer to test anyway. And
excellent. Thanks. All right, so then I wanted to talk a little bit about Homenet and IoT, because I think that this is an important problem. I think being able to have, if you have a home that's got a sophisticated network in it, and you're doing things like operating lights using switches over an IoT internet, then having a good solid solution for how you make that work in a home that is larger than a single Wi-Fi router is important. And there's two things that I think are key to making this work. One of them is making sure that IoT devices are reachable by the other devices that need to reach them, and by no other devices. And by the way, when I say IoT, there's two different kind of instances of IoT that I'm talking about. One is things like Wemos that are connected to your Wi-Fi, or HomeKit mostly uses Wi-Fi. And so you're not actually using a constrained network, and the devices aren't particularly constrained because they have power. The only sense in which they're constrained is that they have relatively small CPUs, but for those of us that grew up programming Apple IIs, they actually are kind of big. Nevertheless, all of my IoT devices are currently isolated on a separate link, and even so, they can still cross-infect each other. I'd really like it if my IoT devices could only talk to the things that I want them to talk to. I think that there's an opportunity to do some work there, and I think that would be good. It would be nice to take advantage of the work that's been done with MUD. The big question that I have is it possible, particularly on a Wi-Fi network, for a node to be isolated from another node that's on the same Wi-Fi network? Julius?
Julius Krobachek, why do you want them to be on the same SSID?
Because
Wi-Fi has
suppose you have 100 IoT devices. Do you really want to have 100 SSIDs?
No.
Right.
Hi, Jacques Latour. I'm with Syrah. And pretty much all of these things for IoT we've been working on as a prototype. I guess you know about this, no? So if you, the project is on GitHub. It's called Secure IoT Home Gateway.
Oh, okay. This is the stuff that Michael's working on also?
Yeah, Michael and Elliot Lear and Syrah and SIDN and Marc Blanchet. So there's a lot of us working on this. And the goal is to build a prototype that it's based on MUD. So we have a semi-functional MUD controller where we can provision IoT device and assign access control to just control where it's supposed to go. We also are addressing the Wi-Fi setup so that keys are unique by IoT device. So they're not shareable and all that. So, and the goal is to have all of this open source in OpenWRT.
Great.
And so look it up. It's in GitHub. And that's it.
Yeah,
that's question?
Great. It would be good to liaise a bit on that. Michael's already reached out to me, and I think was it you who reached out to me, or somebody else in that group? I think reached out to me about this. So anyway.
Is it possible? Yes.
Okay. Daniel.
I think the person that approached you was another person from another project.
Oh, okay.
I'm Stuart Cheshire from Apple. I'm interested in hearing about this. I had not heard about this before. That's partly why we come to these meetings, to learn new things. Is this a working group? Is it an open source project? Are there documents describing this? Where can I go to learn more about this? Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Fabulous. And then the other thing is, last time in Bangkok, we were talking about how to route IoT networks in a HomeNet, and came up with this theory that maybe HNCP was a good way to do it. Since then, so I showed up for the thing-to-thing routing or research group meeting on Friday, and actually quizzed some of the people there about this because I figured they would know, and they did. So Sixlo is actually working on a routing proposal, which is not really a routing proposal at all, but nevertheless, basically what they do is they have, if you have a bunch of IoT networks and each one of them has a backbone router, they connect them all to a single Wi-Fi or wired link, and basically just do proxy neighbor discovery and some information sharing between the backbone routers so that they can all participate in a single IoT mesh. And I think this would work. I'm not sure that the scalability is ideal. And so I think it might be interesting to pursue whether there's an opportunity to use HNCP to make this work better. If we just sit back and wait, they will do their routing proposal and we'll find out whether it works. So that's one option, but it may be worth having more discussion about that. Anyway. Just throwing that out there.
Michael Abrams, so is this for IoT devices that actually have an IPv6 address for the unique device, or
yeah,
okay?
Yeah,
because a lot of these things seems to have like a controller that is the only thing you're talking about, and then it has stuff behind it. But
right, so that's actually kind of like a thing that some of the IoT vendors are trying to get away from because controllers suck. You wind up with like a giant pile of controllers with one IoT device behind each one of them, and that's really stupid. So, or maybe 3 IoT devices behind it. So using, general purpose IP networking is a better approach, but, requires more interoperability work. So, so yeah, I'm talking about that use case, the actual IP networking use case. Anyway,
just another question. So their current work requires to be in the same layer 2 domain, and they don't have like a automatic tunneling setup, or
well, they don't
like
actually need to be in the same layer 2 domain. They're just doing it that way because it's easier.
Yeah, right. I mean, I can also imagine lots of technical ways to solve this, but their current working hypothesis is that they are in the single domain.
Yeah.
Okay. Perhaps we should. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe that's fine. If you've only got like 100 devices on your home network and they're not talking much, it's probably it'd probably work.
Right. So we should. I mean, if we want to support that with multiple home nets with multiple routed everything, then we might need. Well, we were discussing doing that for Wi-Fi anyway, so we might need to be able to extend a layer 2 domain across multiple home net routers. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm curious about this. I don't really have the knowledge to say this is a good idea or this is a bad idea. I'm just curious about it at this point. Okay. I think there's some crossover. Stephen?
Yeah. So just a question on this. This compared to our current charter. So this is all interesting, good stuff, but not currently in the charter of the HomeNet Working Group. Or does it map to a document, or do you think it does? Or what?
Well, the HomeNet architecture actually talks about this issue. I don't know if the document, if the charter talks about it specifically, but certainly it's in the architecture. So,
right.
I mean, the architecture basically says, there will be constrained networks on the edge, and we need to solve that. We need to make that work.
Okay.
So, okay. Yeah. Anyway, so you have a next steps thing on the agenda. I also put down my next steps. This is just my pitch about what I want. It's not necessarily what HomeNet should do. I want to see Homenet become real. We've been working on this for a long time. We've got some pretty cool stuff. It would be nice to actually be able to demo it. I really don't think that Linksys or Eero or Ubiquiti or any of those big vendors is going to adopt this anytime soon. Although if there's anybody here from those organizations that wants to talk, please talk to me. But we can definitely make this work in OpenWRT. And I think if we do make it work in OpenWRT, at this point we're seeing a lot of routers. Like I have a bunch of routers that are like just little things that I bring with me to IETF that aren't super expensive. And there's a company in China that makes them, and they all run OpenWRT. And so if OpenWRT had an easy way to configure routers to be Homenet routers that just worked, then in principle, that company could be shipping OpenWRT routers the next week. Also there are companies like CZ.NIC makes the Taurus Omnia, and that's a kind of a high featureful router that could also be doing Homenet. That would be really cool. So if we could get some grassroots support for this, and then also ISPs, if there are ISPs that are interested in this, we could potentially create a groundswell of support for this functionality that would then result in it actually spreading to some of the bigger vendors. And so that's kind of what I would like to see happen.
Michael Abrahamson. So I concur with that, and just to say that there are commercial vendors that are shipping home routers to ISPs where this is based on OpenWRT. So doing this in OpenWRT would make it extremely easy for them to include that package as well, and to do this. So I mean, and I know, I mean, Ubiquiti, if you look under the hood, that's also a lot of open source under there, so it would be definitely possible for them to take that as well.
Right, yeah, the issue I think with the big vendors is that they actually get a certain amount of win from having their routers not interoperate with their competitors' routers. So,
right, okay.
Yeah,
but anyway, there is use in demoing this in OpenWRT, so
definitely.
Violent agreement.
Yeah.
Jordi Palet, I was going to say something similar actually. I am working with ISPs that because they don't find the product they need, for example, to support IPv4 as a service in the market, we go to very cheap Chinese vendors which have the same hardware as more expensive ones because basically it's a single on chip and that's it. Yeah. And we use custom OpenWRT and that's it. And I know by fact that without naming specific big vendors like some of those that you have in the slide, but some others as well, they have in fact as the base code for their products OpenWRT, and they just changed the face. Okay, so I think having that in OpenWRT will have impact in the market, and I think more and more companies are looking to open source solutions. I am not really sure that they are trying to avoid to be compatible with competitors, maybe some specific functionalities, but if they are standards, they should interoperate, right? So
right, yeah, and by the way, if we make it easy for them, then when the market tells them that they should do it, they'll do it very quickly.
Julius Krobachek, you know what I'm going to say?
No.
No. Okay, so Homenet, all of the Homenet stack, I mean the parts of the Homenet stack that exists are part of OpenWRT.
Yeah.
And they work.
Yep.
Mark, Stephen, and Pierre have done some amazing work of integration of Homenet into OpenWRT. The complaint is not that it's not an OpenWRT, but just that it's not enabled by default.
Exactly.
It requires a little bit of tweaking of configuration files. I have no idea whether you can do it through the web interface because it's simpler to do with the configuration files. Now, I happen to disagree with you. I think that's not where the problem lies. That if there were interest, the fact that it's not enabled by default would not be a problem. It's only a problem because there is no interest in Homenet for other reasons. If actually people think that is the problem, well, it might be politically difficult to get Homenet enabled by default in OpenWRT, but it's very easy to fork OpenWRT and to build images that will actually enable Homenet for Homenet by default in those images. So that should not be a problem if actually there is the motivation to get the work done.
Yeah. So Julius, the approach that I'm suggesting is that we do just that, right? Because that's obvious, right? It's open source. We can do whatever we want with it. So make it easy for people who want to do it. But then the other bit is that I really actually would like to pitch it to some of the vendors that I think would actually get market benefit from doing it because they're small. But they don't have the advantage of owning the market.
But it's not only the fact that it's open source. There's a stronger property here. OpenWRT is actually designed so that it is easy to make custom distributions based on OpenWRT.
Yes.
Michael Abrahamson again. I wouldn't even use the word fork. You enable packages when you compile it.
Profile.
So yes, a profile. Because I wouldn't even. Using the word fork is kind of.
That's
heavy.
a good point.
So you create the custom feed, and you might need to disable some stuff that it is default on. You enable some other stuff, and that's what I did when I tested Homenet a half year ago or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So this is perfectly possible.
Yeah. So the other thing to say about what Julia said is that yes, we do have support for HNCP. We have support for routing. It's pretty easy to get working. We don't have support for naming. That's kind of the missing link. So that's really what I'm focused on. I don't actually see myself having to do a whole bunch of work on HNCP. There are a couple things that I wanted of HNCP that it doesn't currently provide, but it's relatively minor, and I think they're all very much in keeping with what HNCP is quite capable of doing. So I'm not too worried about getting that working. I'm hoping that I can get some help from the HNCP experts on it. But anyway, so that's what I have. I'd like to see this. I'd like to try and make it a goal that we actually have some code that we can try out at Hackathon in Montreal. And if anybody's interested in participating in that, either as people who are helping me to get that done, or as people who just want to bring some routers to Montreal and see if they can interoperate, that would be awesome. And that's all I got.
Daniel is there now.
Yes. So thank you, Ted. Really appreciate that. We kind of skipped over the first item on, well, one of the first items on the agenda, which is just to get an update on some of the expired drafts and maybe what thoughts and plans are with those. And we asked if Daniel would just maybe come to the mic. You can pick your choice of mic and tell us a bit.
This mic? Okay. Hi. So I think that two expired drafts, that I'm sort of concerned. One is about how you can outsource your the name you want to be public to a DNS provider, and the intent was to really provide a mechanism so that we do not fall down to proprietary API. So this is one of the work I think should be continued. I know some of the people are implementing it, so I expect that we provide soon, I guess, integrate the feedbacks and have a new updated version. Another draft is about how you configure this mechanism and based on the GHCP options. So, which means in our case, it would be most likely the ISP providing the necessary parameters that could be used then to configure the outsourcing architecture. I'm not sure this draft. I don't know. It's a way to configure something. If it's never going to be implemented, it may be not worth doing this one. So that is up to what the working group think, and if there are any ISPs, if they're willing to implement this one or not. At the time I was working for France Telecom, they were willing to, but I don't know yet what they're willing to do. So that's to be discussed.
Okay, so Daniel, sorry, can you just repeat the name of the draft that you think is worth proceeding with? And
it's the front-end naming architecture.
Okay, so the front-end naming architecture you think is worth resurrecting and proceeding with. The other one, not so sure.
Yeah, not so sure. I mean,
okay. Okay, thank you. So I guess that leaves our where do we go from here discussion. And I can't remember, Barbara, was I supposed to be the bad cop or the good cop? I think I was the bad cop. So I sent mail to the list, and there was like dribbles of response. A few people are obviously doing good work here. It's, as chairs, it's absolutely impossible to know what the working group think of it because nobody's saying anything. So that kind of puts us in a position where we're not going to proceed to produce RFCs as is. So Ted is suggesting a slight change of direction, I think. So we need to know what people think of that, or if people aren't willing to say what they think of that and comment on the list, then we need to just talk to our new esteemed AD about getting out of people's way. So please discuss.
Ted Lemon. So I have a theory, which I hope is true, which is that if there were actually like hope of progress, there would be more feedback. I don't know if that's true, but it would be nice to see what happens over the course of the next few months if I actually get time to do some code and push some stuff out. Maybe we get some more comment.
Hi, Tim Jones. Yeah, I agree with the stuff Ted put up there earlier, particularly with respect to open work. One thing I noticed looking at the working group's data tracker material is that it seems the charter is unchanged since July 2011 when the working group was formed, and it talks about forming an architecture and blah, blah, blah. Maybe this is really a rechartering discussion as well, and to maybe look at what we put in the charter and whether we've achieved it or not might be useful as part of the exercise.
So just as a clarifying question, given that I asked the mailing list, is one of the things we should do, shut down or change direction and got bugger all response, then do you think a rechartering discussion is likely to energize people somehow?
Well, it might help people remember what we said we were going to do and have some discussion about whether we achieved it. But in practice, what Ted said is right. If none of the vendors are picking it up, the only real hope is to get it into something, OpenWorks in particular, and then hope that it gains traction from there. But yeah, it's difficult when there's so little impetus, and I think it's been something that's sort of looking more recently from the outside of the working group. It does seem to have stalled for the last couple of years in terms of producing things. It's obviously not your fault. You can only work with what you've got. But at the moment, it seems pretty sad, really. There's some good work happening. It's just, and it's in OpenWorks, as others have said, but it's just for some reason not being turned on.
Hi, Stephen. Robin Wilton again. I think, for me at least, the clue lies in the two sections of what Ted presented. There was one section on essentially how to structure the architecture if people have got multiple routers in their home. And then there was another section about functionality for routers and home controllers in an IoT environment. If that latter part has emerged since the charter was written and you're slightly uncomfortable about whether the charter covers that, then maybe the charter does need to be looked at again. Because it seems to me at the moment, the likelihood of anyone setting off down either of those two paths from where we are now in a home, it's much more probable that they will go down the IoT route than the having multiple routers route at the root of the issue. So focusing all the attention on how do we make multiple routers work in a single house may be very worthy, but it feels to me like that's not what the market is going to drive. What the market is more likely to drive is you've got one router in your house and you've got maybe multiple IoT device controllers in your house. That seems to me the use case that's most likely to drive the market and vendor behavior.
Hi, Jacques Latour. Totally agree with, I forgot your name. Go ahead. So I'm in the same boat. So when I started this secure home IoT project at Syrah, I looked at Homenet and all that. And this addresses the use case of maybe 0.01% of the people that know how to do home gateways with 2 links in your home. And the work associated with that is not really relevant with what people are asking for at home. So when we did our quick survey, people at home want to have a secure home network. When they put an IoT device that they have no clue what it does, they want to make sure that it only does what it's supposed to do and it behaves according to normal rules. So what we started to look at is, because if you're going to be adding a bunch of devices at home, you're going to create your home network is going to be like an enterprise network. You need to have zones, you need to have security zones, you need to have outbound security control to protect your traffic going out. You want your fridge only to talk to your vendor's fridge, and that's where MUD came in, to have manufacturer user description. So certain rules need to be applied to outbound traffic, and I haven't seen any work related to that. And this is a gap. We need to build a secure home security framework to define how home network actually works. And that's what we're trying to implement today. We're defining a framework for that, but I have no clue where the works fit. We're building new APIs to provision IoT device, to provision the router itself. And I don't know where that, it doesn't fit in this group because this is more focused. Yeah. Oh, that's a lot of, yes. But there's a gap for the home network to make them secure. So we're working ahead, but we're writing drafts and we don't know where they fit. And so that's a challenge we need to figure out.
Ted Lemon. So that was a fun statement to be standing behind. I actually, if you don't know what working group to do this in, I think, to me, this is, we've done a bunch of work. I think it would be nice to finish the simple Homenet naming stuff. That's been going on a while. I really feel like implementation needs to happen before that gets finished. But to me, one of the very interesting problems that we face is how do we do exactly what he was talking about? And that actually seems to me to fit into what the Homenet working group ought to be doing. I don't know if you guys would want to do it in the Homenet working group if we made a place for you to do it here. If you would, I think that might be an interesting thing to pursue. It is a bit of a change of direction. It's consistent with what we started out doing, but it would probably require a recharter, and it's definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart and that I've been interested in having us work on for a long time, and that we haven't really worked on because there hasn't been energy in the working group to work on it. So I think it would be like, if that were a way to get some new churn happening on the mailing list and so forth, I think that would be really good.
So we have Dave in the queue, hitting the red button. Dave, you're on.
Dave? Dave, are you there? We can't hear you, other than scratchiness. Yeah.
Guess it's the red button again. Okay. So, Julius, I guess.
So, Julius Krobacek. I think I'm agreeing with Robin and Jacques earlier on, but I'll put it a little bit differently. I think that in this group, we are absolutely hopeless at marketing. And we are hopeless at marketing for two reasons. One is that we communicate badly. So I don't know if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, somebody said that the problem of Homenet on the mailing list, that's the problem of Homenet is that it only supports IPv6. And then I explained that no, we have full feature parity for IPv6 and IPv4, and people were surprised that we actually implement everything for IPv4. And that's the people who are on the Homenet mailing list. Right? That's frightening. It shows you how badly we've managed to communicate what we are doing. And I think there is a more fundamental reason to us communicating badly, is that we have failed to find out, to have a clear message on what feature we're giving to people. So we know, everyone in this room, everyone on the Jabber channel knows that doing things at layer 3 rather than switching is good. It's good in itself. It doesn't need any justification. But you don't actually sell things to people by telling them, look, it's a good thing, it's the light side of the force. You actually need to tell them, look, I can do that which you cannot do in your home network right now. And we have not been concentrating on communicating over the fact that we have actual features. Actually, if I ask you, what are the features we're giving people? How do you sell Homenet to someone whom you meet in the metro and have just 3 minutes to explain it to? I think many people, even in this room, would have to think about it for a while. So when I was writing, so I think that the main feature is good support for shortest path routing in complex topologies. But that's not the way you explain it to normal people. Most people, when they install Wi-Fi at home, are very surprised to discover that they cannot have the access points communicate over wireless links. They expect to be able to put an extra access point in their kitchen, and they're very surprised when you tell them you actually will need to wire your kitchen over Ethernet. Homenet has perfect support for topologies in which wireless links are used for transit. Now, some of you might remember when I was writing the Babel profile for Homenet, I had an entry in which I explained how you need to use a profile of Babel that actually is able to estimate link quality in order to provide shortest path routing with wireless transit links. And in the rationale I wrote, that's a feature that's easy to explain to your boss and your customers. And I was chastised by the group for being too informal in my formulation. And this simple, clear formulation was replaced by something much more complicated and more difficult to communicate around. So I'm not sure what the cause, what the consequence is. I think there is no doubt that we're communicating badly. And I'm not sure if we're communicating badly because we don't have a clear idea of the features we're providing, or whether we don't have a clear idea of the features we're providing because we're communicating badly.
And Mikhail, can you also relay the jabber from Dave?
Okay, so now I'm Dave. Dave Tat. Good naming is desperately needed in an era where we rarely have control over the IPv6 delegation.
There was a bit earlier, sorry.
Oh,
yeah, go up to my comment.
Oh, he's written more.
Yeah, he's written a lot.
Oh, okay.
My comment is.
Okay, my comment is, regarding the scope of Homenet, I care about small and medium business networks. Now deal with IoT there is very, very important. Multiple routers is important. Security is hugely important. Good naming is desperately needed. Okay. He said he wouldn't write more, but then he did, but I'll stop there. Okay. So now I'm Michael again. Frankly, the whole not being able to transport layer 2 over Homenet, I mean, I would never expose myself and my family to my 2 access points being in 2 different broadcast domains and trying to do handover between them the way it's currently implemented. I mean, my requirement is I need to sit on some kind of IP real-time communication channel and walk to my kitchen to get tea and walk back, and my calls should stay up. The Homenet today doesn't provide this premise. So I need a broadcast domain for my 2 Wi-Fi access points. Now we have this IoT thingy popping up and so on that has the same requirement. I don't think this can succeed without us being able to provide multiple broadcast domains over this infrastructure. I mean, we're not going to win that war. We want to have incremental deployment towards routed domains and doing service discovery between routing domains and so on. But saying now that in order to use Homenet, you need to be able to do seamless, ILNP or something like that, handover between domains, the hosts aren't there. I mean, this is a miserably bad user experience. We can't drive this. We need to be able to be part of an incremental deployment in doing this. So I think that is one of the major problems. So I actually tried this. I mean, I actually set up Homenet with 3 routers in my home and tried to use it. And then I turned it off again because doing this for Wi-Fi is just not workable. And the current implementation, it needs more knobs. I tried to use it because I had two dual stack uplinks that were pretty good at home. I couldn't use Homenet because it didn't allow me to tune it, so it prioritized my host to use one of them and the second one for fallback. Because the one that it didn't want to use had 1 week DHCP-v6 prefix delegation time, and that was a lifetime in the RAs, and that's what the host shows, and I didn't want them to prioritize that. And I mean, if I unplug or reboot the router in the current implementation of Homenet, next time I plug in the link, it has new addresses. If I reboot it, it'll have new addresses. It's a proof of concept implementation, but it needs more work before you can actually use it. I tried, and I turned it off because it just doesn't work as an end-to-end solution today. I would like it to work, but currently it doesn't.
So just to note, I think people are having a good discussion here about some of the desirable properties of home networks, but not how as a working group we get to help there.
Right. So actually, I think there's a nugget in what Mikhail just said, though, which is I don't remember actually doing any debugging of this problem on the mailing list. And if we're going to actually have a functioning working group, part of what we need to be doing is actually just that. Like if you're having these kinds of problems, we should be talking about them on the mailing list. I'm going to let Julius talk
now. So concerning the roaming issue, you're extremely right. We needed to have roaming without renumbering between access points. And where I don't agree with you is that requires a single broadcast domain. And the proof that you don't need a single broadcast domain is 4G. In 4G, you have seamless roaming with no renumbering, and you don't have a single broadcast domain. And what they use is a complex infrastructure based on a whole series of acronyms. I don't know if you've tried to read any 4G standards. We at IETF are actually good. We don't use a lot of acronyms. Okay? Oh, they use numbers too. They will use T59 and S43 and try to follow the standards. But they do actually use some of our protocols. They use PMIP-v6, Proxy Mobile IPv6. So there's a whole infrastructure, but it can be done. Now, question is, can it be done in a simple, distributed way with no infrastructure? And the answer is yes, but it's tricky. It took me 2 years to get the implementation done, and it has been running for the last 2 weeks. So I don't have a presentation ready on the subject yet, but I do actually have an implementation of seamless roaming at layer 3 compatible with the Homenet architecture.
Okay, Michael Irumsing. And so when that's published and available in OpenDirectT, I'll gladly test it with my walking to get tea in my kitchen use case, because I have 2 access points. I can create a new SSID and then I can test that. So that works. About 3GPP networks, yes, they have a tunnel that follows the wherever you are. So it's anchored in one end, and then it moves around between the base stations, and they have very complex machinery to get this done.
So again, I think I was the bad cop. So it's a great discussion, and we have loads of time. But can we focus on where as a working group should we be going so that we can operate as a useful working group?
So Ted Lemon again. I think I'll just point out that this discussion. I've just heard a bunch of things about work that's being done in Homenet and problems that are being had in Homenet that never made it to the mailing list. And I think that may be part of our marketing problem. Because, and I don't claim to be immune to this. I've been thinking about this exact same problem too. How do we make this work? Because, after the presentation in Bangkok, I was like, well, okay, do we actually have a problem that we need to solve here? I think we do. And if we do have a problem we need to solve here, what are the things that we're not doing that we need to do? And one of them is this exact thing that Julius was just talking about. Whether we do it with a flat layer 2 or a routed layer 3, we need to address that particular use case. My phone should continue to work as I walk from my house into my garage and switch to a different AP. So I think that we have interesting work to do, and part of the problem that we have is that we haven't actually been talking about it on the mailing list. And so I would suggest that part of the way forward for the working group is to actually, this actually kind of goes back to, I think it was Tim was saying we need to recharter. My initial reaction to that was, oh God, I hate rechartering, that sucks. But actually I think he's right. I think that we should have a discussion about chartering, because it may be that part of the reason we're not discussing these things on the mailing list is because we think they're out of scope, and they're not out of scope. So maybe the way forward is actually to open a rechartering discussion. I think that we've had enough discussion here at the mic just randomly that the evidence is that there is actually interest in doing some work, and it's a little weird that we haven't been talking about it.
So two things. One is in Jabber, Dave said he intends to take his threat of helping and turn it into reality. He said, "Dear Ted," by the way. And secondly, yes, we do seem to be good as a group of having fine discussions face to face and nothing happening on the list. I agree.
Michael Abrams again. So this was discussed, but it was discussed in like 2016 or something, and then it hasn't been discussed since. But yeah, we should resurrect these discussions and figure out where the gaps are and what you need to do in actually making this useful. And we need configuration knobs, and we need to fix some things that currently is not working. So sounded good what Julius described, and I'll gladly test that.
Robin Wilton again, just one quick one to pick up on Julius's point about communication. I think on the one hand, if a working group exists to develop specs, then it's developing things that aren't immediately useful as marketing documents, and that's normal. On the other hand, the problem that we seem to be faced with is we've got vendors who are, as usual, creating islands of automation, and it's in their interest to create walled gardens, and we're doing a piece of work aimed at giving them something that's not a walled garden that we would like them to do instead. And that doesn't seem to me to be a new problem for this working group. It seems to me to be a generic problem about open standards. So I can't believe that issue hasn't been addressed and fixed elsewhere. Maybe what we should be doing is looking at how, in general, open standards enter the market and seeing if there's anything that we could be doing that we're not doing.
Ted Lemon, yeah, so I totally agree with that. I think that, so if you look at, if you go to Homenet Homenet.org, right now, it's actually a blank page. Like it doesn't even produce, you don't get a web page. We could probably do something about that. Yeah, I think there, another thing that I think would be interesting to think about is there's the, in the T2TRG meeting that we had on Friday, there was discussion about, do we want to be able to do, I can't remember what the acronym is. It was, I think, a 4-letter acronym, but basically the idea is the ability to store data in the infrastructure, or to have work done in the infrastructure. For relatively competent Homenet routers, the ability to do work in the infrastructure would actually be an enabling technology for things that end users might really want to be able to do but currently can't do. Right now, as an end user, if you want to have a server, you pretty much have to go to some kind of cloud, right? Or you have to set up a Mac or something like that on your home network. And people don't do that. And it's not automatic. There's no way that I could pitch to an end user who doesn't already believe in having a server at home why they should spend $1,000 to set up a server at home so that they can do chat with their friends or something like that. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there's a whole bunch of services that aren't being enabled by our current stuff, by our current infrastructure, that could be enabled by something like a Homenet, where we don't need a lot of computes, but we need a rendezvous point so that we can communicate. And that's actually something that I've been wanting to do. I remember proposing this at a now defunct company as a product like 5 or 6 years ago. And it's something that Homenet could in principle work on, and I think it would be valuable to work on. So, you know, there's a lot of interesting stuff we could do if there's interest in doing it. People keep showing up for the working group. So there must be some reason why everybody keeps showing up.
Right.
So now I'm Dave Tat again. I would support a recharter for home, small and medium business, and host changes should be within scope. So can I ask?
I just want to ask a couple of kind of baseline questions before we get too into rechartering, because everybody loves being optimistic about what might happen in future, but sometimes doesn't. So if nothing changes, how many people are suddenly going to get really active on the mailing list? You're already active on the mailing list. So that's like, nobody has said that they're suddenly going to get very active on the mailing list, which to me means that unless we do something, then we probably should close the group. Right? So I think there's some things we could do are wait a while to see if the implementations things mature some more. At some point now or after waiting a while, talk about rechartering or close the working group. So I'd be really interested in opinions in that space.
Yep. Michael Abrams. So I think that it's an interesting question about the small and medium businesses use case as well. I mean, I can also see people they have like a summer house and, you know, a normal house.
Sure.
They have
Michael, sorry, but you're assuming an answer to the question that I asked has already been achieved. My question wasn't what should we recharter for? But should we just stop? Should we recharter? Should we close?
Okay, so you just want to ask the rechartering question. Okay.
Well, I think you're assuming, I don't know from what you're saying whether you think we should wait for the implementations, we should close and just try a new group,
okay,
or we
you
should
want
recharter.
my opinion on that? Yeah, well, I think we should have a rechartering discussion and figure out.
Okay, good. And so can other people, if you're saying that, also say we should do that now, or we should wait until some more hackathon-y type stuff has happened, or whatever?
No, I think we can have the rechartering discussion now.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Do you want opinions on what that should be, or are we still talking about if?
Well, there seems to be enough people in line, hopefully on that topic, in a focused manner that we can.
Or what it would be? Because if it's what it would be, I want to say something. Okay.
No, so we have time, Michael, to come back to the actual what we might recharter about, if that suits you.
Okay, Eric Vink is an individual contributor right now. Very nice to see the energy which is here, but as you said, Steve, wait and see for the mailing list. And again, individual contributor rechartering seems the right way to go if we get the energy behind.
Ted Lemon. So I actually thought about this particular question that you asked a bit the other day, and the conclusion that I came to is that if we continue the way we're going, I think that there's interesting work and there are people who are interested in it, but on the other hand, we're consuming a bunch of time at the IETF. And so one additional alternative, you proposed 3 alternatives. I would say there's a 4th alternative, which is continue to have the working group open, but just accept that it's a long-term thing and we don't need to meet at every IETF. I'm not proposing that we not meet at Montreal because I think that we have reason to believe that there might be some things to talk about in Montreal. But and you know, obviously you might prefer as the working group chair not to have this responsibility if nothing's happening. But it has been the case in the past that working groups have kind of submarined for a while. I would hate to lose this community. If there are people who are interested in this, but you know, now isn't the time for them to be hacking on it, fine. I'd still like to be able to have a place where we can do this work, even if it winds up going very slowly. So I personally, I think rechartering is something we should try, because it seems like there's some energy to do some stuff that's not really clearly in the charter, and if we rechartered, that energy might wind up landing in the working group, which would be good. I think we've got a bunch of stuff on the agenda to get done for Montreal, and if that stuff gets done, then that might create some new energy. So that's a thing to try. And then, if we find that we don't have the energy that we need to continue being a working group that meets every IETF, I still think that it's worth having the working group around in some form, because clearly there is interest in this topic in the long term. So.
Sure, and I just wonder. I agree. It's going kind of quiescent for a while is an option. It does kind of beg the question: would you ever get enough review to call consensus on the results? Right.
I see. Robin Wilton. Again, I don't think this is a new problem unique to this group. It's the fate of groups like this that they have to try and define what vendors should do before there is substantial consumer demand for it. And obviously there isn't substantial consumer demand for this yet, because although people in this room have expressed the kind of problems that hit you when you try and have multiple devices in your home, there's nothing in the mainstream market that consumers can go to and say, well, I'll have one of those, because we're still dealing with walled gardens. So the products in the consumer market aren't driving demand for what we think we should be doing. So consumers aren't generating demand for what we ought to do, regardless of it being a good idea. Vendors aren't generating demand for this spec yet. But the way to convince vendors to do that is, and I think this comes back to Julian's point about communication again, the way to convince vendors to do that is not only to write specs, it's to write specs and do other stuff as well. And I don't know whether that other stuff is the legitimate work of this working group or not.
So before you go away, Robin, just coming back to the question I actually asked, what would your answers be?
Well, if it's legitimate for a working group like this to produce things that is not specs, but is aimed at influencing the vendor community to behave in a particular way, then yes, this working group should continue and it should produce those things.
But we just established, so again, I think we established as a baseline here that nobody's going to suddenly get active if we don't change something. We can go quiescent, we can pause a while and wait for the implementation work to continue and then reevaluate. We can start rechartering now. So those are the kind of options that we're trying to get feedback on specifically.
Right, but so I'm speaking in an individual capacity. I'm not representing a particular organization, but if an organization like mine were working on, for example, things that increase trust in the infrastructure for IoT, this might be the kind of thing that they might want to do, or support, or enable, or facilitate.
Okay, and just to be clear, I'm not hearing the answer to the question I asked.
I can't commit to my organization suddenly saying it's going to do stuff in the next 6 months on this, but it's an area that we're working on.
Sure.
And so it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that we would want to support, enable, or facilitate work in that direction. But we can't do that if the working group shuts down.
Tim Jones, sorry, Stephen, can you remind me what the question was, having been in the queue?
So the question is, given that the baseline is that nobody's suddenly going to get active, should we just wait and see how TED's implementation work goes? Should we start rechartering discussion now? Should we do that later? Should we just close?
So I've remembered what I was going to say now. So, yeah, I think what we lack is probably clarity in a current and up-to-date problem statement. What problem are we trying to solve? I was reminded of Thomas Narton's excellent RFC on holding a successful BOF. If we just imagine we're trying to start now with where we are and making a working group to advance things, then we'd have to answer his sort of classic 5 points here. I think we do have people that are contributing very good inputs to solve particular problems. For example, Julius using wireless as a transit, potentially the secure IoT stuff, TED and the naming stuff, but I don't think we do a very good job of nailing down the problem statement that we're working on. So if we did go back and look at Thomas's 5 points, it's that we need a clear problem that needs solving and that the IETF is the right place to do it. Second, critical mass of participants willing to work on it, which I think is the point you're clearly making. Thirdly, the scope of the problem is well defined and understood. I'm not sure at the moment it is. Fourth, there is agreement that the specific deliverables are the right set. I'm not sure what our planned deliverables even are at the moment. And fifth, it's believed that the working group has a reasonable probability of success. But it's very hard to define success when you don't know necessarily what the problem that you're working on is. So I think if we viewed it as trying to answer those 5 questions, maybe, or particularly the first one, defining the problem statement, maybe that is about rechartering. Maybe that is, we can bring more people in by identifying specific problems that we want to work on, where they would then come into the group, like maybe secure IoT, as we have done with Julius, for example. And I think
Tim,
those are good examples.
Do you think that having a rechartering discussion would at least help clarify some of these cases of what people do and don't want to do?
Yeah, I don't think it can possibly be helpful that we have an 8-year-old charter. I think part of the reason, I can't remember, I think Julius said that people think this is a V6 only group is because the charter was written 8 years ago, when 0.0% of the internet of the internet's traffic was V6. It was written with a sort of an optimistic V6 will make home networking better perspective. And obviously we can have a long discussion about that, but that's why that perception is there. If the charter is updated to make it more agnostic about IP version, for example, I don't think that would now be a bad thing, to be pragmatic about it.
And then we'll have Daniel, and I'll try to summarize.
Hi. So, Daniel. So I think there are 2 issues. One, which is the adoption by the industry, what we produced, and the one, do we have enough energy in the working group to provide some feedbacks even? And we can provide documents without knowing whether it's going to be adopted or not. So what is important is that I think at that level is that we don't lose all the things we've done. I see I think we're making progress in the way we implement things. I see some implementations. I see some effort. So I think we should not kill that. I don't think recharting will be helpful because we will end up okay, we have the long-standing draft 2, and they're like head of blocking in TCP. So these are the one, and maybe you're going to have some others, but we will need the ones that are here first. So I don't think I think recharting discussion will lose some of the energy rather than being constructive. Maybe what I would recommend so that's personal opinion, might be pretty bad, but is to have a deadline saying by the end of the year, the work that is ongoing should have made significant progress, or we'll leave it.
Okay. I'll let one more then.
Evan Hunt, ISC. I'm just proxying for Dave Todd on Jabber, though. He asked if we could get a hum on rechartering today.
You want to do a hum? It's a good way to get some input. Okay, so people who think that rechartering discussion, which may or may not successfully result in a recharter, would be a good idea, please hum. People who think it's an absolute waste of time, please hum. Sorry, Daniel.
So Daniel, I think you already said why, or is there anything else to add? I think you already explained why you don't. Yeah, okay, good. And can we have a show of hands who's actually beyond the action?
So, of those who hummed so vociferously, who thinks they would actually be willing to actively suggest charter text and participate in the discussion? Okay. That's over half a dozen, including Daniel, I should point out. Okay. So, my summary is there is desire to start a rechartering discussion. Where it will go, nobody knows. But we'll try to direct it and channel it so that it has the potential to become something successful. There is also, does not seem to be a strong desire for, I guess, the chairs to do sort of more setting light to fires and things like that necessarily. It's kind of people need to get their work done. maybe there's not a meeting next time. We'll keep the list open, even if we don't successfully recharter. We'll keep things open. We may or may not have a meeting in Montreal, but in any case, the list will be there, and it sounds like there may be hackathon progress. Now, I do have a question, given that there's been experimentation with sort of these open sessions. If there is perchance an open session, should we try to kind of on the list say this time in the open session, anyone who wants to come gather around in the code lounge and let's hack some more for the people who are around? Yes, Ted.
So, Ted Lemon, you've probably heard me gritch about the tendency in IETF for us to all just get up and do presentations and a few questions get asked and then we all wander off and no actual work gets done. I think if we're going to have sessions, it might be cool to have sessions where we actually do just what you said, hack. Mm-hmm. Because really the work that we're doing is development work. We're not, like the documenting of what we've developed is important, but you know, as I discovered when I went through and thought about what I needed to do to implement the Homenet architecture, that is the first thing we have to do. Like, and all of the stuff that I've been doing the last year on Homenet and on DNSSD has been implementation focused. It's been very effective. It's a great way to generate energy. You know, we have people show up for hackathon. If there are people who are interested in working on this stuff, it would be awfully nice if we could just get together in a room and work on it together. And, you know, and share the information that we have. Like, I mean, for example, you know, not to put you on the spot, Julius, but you have a great deal of knowledge about HNCP that I don't have. And, you know, also you have a great deal of knowledge about Babel. I mean, I think Babel is fairly easy to set up. So, but, you know, I think it's still, it would be useful for us all to be in a room, whether it's during the hackathon or whether it's a session in IETF, but like you're describing, where we just get a room that people who actually want to hack can be in. I think that would be great. I think that would be actually like what I did for this IETF in my presentation was actually something that would have probably gone better in a room with a bunch of people hacking, and we could have actually worked on that stuff instead of me just like reciting it. So
okay, then I'm certainly willing to try and early, if they have unstructured time with available rooms, try and snag a room specifically for this as part of our experiment.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is that, you know, that it's entirely possible to have a face-to-face interim meeting if people really want to meet and do stuff. So if there's energy and people want to meet, then we're happy to help organize that. That's pretty easy.
Tim Jones. So one open question is how we engage with projects or other communities that we think bring useful things to this working group. So, for example, we've heard of one today. I've not heard of your project until today, and I will now certainly be looking at it. How do we actually find the others? How do we attract them to come here? Maybe part of that is defining a clear problem statement and advertising it. The other thing that's different from when we charted in 2011 now is that we have, in theory, a lot more sophisticated home networks. We have, I don't know, was it 25–30% of the home networks on the planet now running V6. There's someone sat quite close to me who has 5 million customers, I think, with V6 in their homes, or quite a few anyway. You know, and they're deploying smart devices in their homes. How do we get their input here and comment and input from those? What is it that we can do that might make it attractive for them to actually use this stuff, where at the moment they don't?
So let me see if I can summarize what the charter discussion maybe should be about. It sounds like there's some additional use cases that are of interest and some expanding. Actually, yeah, I don't think I can fully summarize. I heard so many things. I think.
So, just to give you a second, we have a Jabber chat comment, Michael.
Okay, so Dave Tat wants to say that he doesn't like hackathons and he would like stuff to be done continuously over time every week, get builds done, do continuous integration, gather QA on testers, iterate. So he has a point. Having an IRC channel or some kind of forum to continuously do stuff in, instead of saying, oh, let's have a hackathon every 3 months. There is a point to that.
Ted Lemon again. Yeah, so I actually think Dave's totally right about that. I think, though, that the hackathon also serves a purpose. It's not that it needs to be one or the other, but that actually both are good. If we're not making steady forward progress, then having a hackathon tends to be a little bit of like, you know, it's very sudden and we aren't really prepared, and we just kind of, we show up and whatever happens. But it would be a lot better if we were to come into the hackathon with some energy. And so if we're collaborating off, you know, in between IETFs on this stuff, then when hackathon rolls around and we're all face to face, then that is going to be a much more powerful experience than if we just do nothing for the interregnum, and then when we show up at IETF, we all kind of are like, oh, well, what should we work on? So. Yeah.
So okay, sticking my bad cop hat on again. Do you need help to self-organize?
Well, it sounds like. I mean, I think, you know, if you want to do some prodding, I don't think that would be a bad thing. It sounds like Dave's got some energy to actually try to create momentum. And so if Dave's willing to drive that, then that kind of takes you off the hook. I think somebody needs to drive it. Otherwise, you know, realistically, it's not going to happen. So if that's Dave, that's great. If that's you, that's great. This is more on my agenda now than it was prior to this IETF, because prior to this IETF, I was mainly doing DNSSD implementation work. That's mostly done at this point. So actually very much on my agenda for this break is to do work on OpenWRT. So there should be some self-sustaining momentum on my part with that as well. But yeah, you know, if you don't see us talking about it on the mailing list, I think it's entirely appropriate for you to say, what the hell are you guys doing, and why aren't you talking about this on the mailing list? Because otherwise, you know, we definitely have a pattern of not talking about this on the mailing list, and then not talking about it on the mailing list means that those people who are on the mailing list aren't seeing the work being done, and they aren't receiving the sort of energy that is going on in the background. So.
Okay, so just to summarize that, you're saying that you, Dave, some other folks hope to self-organize, and we should beat you up if you don't.
Yes.
Julius Krobachuk, just a quick comment to say that Dave has been doing that for the last few years. He's probably one of the two people who have broken Babel the most times.
Good.
Yeah, I will second that. Yay, Dave.
Okay. So, do we have any AD wisdom to descend from above?
Terry Manderson, outgoing AD. Wisdom is a really strong word. I don't know whether it's wisdom. I think there's obviously some clarifications that need to happen to the charter. I really like the 5 points that Tim brought up from Tom Narton. That's applicable here, and I think you should use that as guidance in your charter discussions and defining your problem statement. It seems, and what I've heard so far is about 5 pages worth of problem statements and then another 17 pages of use cases. So they are not mutually exclusive, but they're not also fully inclusive either. So there's a lot of thought that you are actually going to have to go through to get to that point. I think Ted is absolutely on the money that unless code continually gets cut and tested, then this working group is not really going to be productive. To answer your question, do you need help self-organizing? And I love that question. Yes,
absolutely, I do. I think the working group does need a air quotes project manager of sorts to kick people along. Whether that's you, the working group chairs, or you wish to assign somebody to take on that role, to be the ringmaster to use that whip, then I'll leave that to yours and the working group's discretion for another 30 hours. I think that's the only direction I have for you. I think there's been some fantastic work and done in Homenet, but it's at that really bizarre point right now of struggling to find both enthusiasm and direction.
Okay, so there's some chat in the Jabber room about mechanics of charter discussion, whether you use the list and or some GitHub repo. I think we're going to suggest not trying to dive into that charter discussion right here and now, but rather take it to the list, because I think part of the test is, does it happen on the list? So I think that was...
I would be curious if people would be willing to try it on GitHub. I mean, we're sort of also trying that in DNSSD, and we haven't got a whole lot, but I mean, we could kind of encourage people. It gives us a place to kind of organize thoughts better than an email list.
Michael Abrams, so personally, I don't like the GitHub way of discussing things, and also you have to set up to get email notifications instead of the formatting and so on. It's not as good, and I guess it's all what you're used to. I can do either, but I mean, if I have to choose,
we'll try it on the email list then. The old tech for old people.
I mean, if everybody else wants to do GitHub, we'll do that. But
yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. This is a good point. We do not want to have a discussion in two places at the same time.
Correct. Yeah.
That is not good.
Right.
Yeah, so let's decide on one.
We'll chat with our outgoing AD for the next 29 hours and our incoming AD for the next 29 years. So we'll chat and propose something on the list, and we'll confirm the home on the list obviously as well.
Ted, I'm just concurring that on the mailing list has the benefit that the mailing list needs more traffic.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, I think with that we were going to let you enjoy a little bit extra time for the rest of your morning. Nothing else, no other business? Thank you.
If you're coming to Because, bring popcorn.
Okay, so should we just offer them a blank GitHub page?
Well, I mean,
MD
just load up the old charter, load up the existing charter, kind of pop in a few.
Well, maybe we should think about this.
I mean, I'd start on the list and maybe see where the list takes it, and then once we have it a little more confined, take it over to GitHub.
Yeah, we need to come back home.
Okay.
But yeah, I think there might be I hope if we get a charter that's kind of more focused on current OpenWRT style homeworks.
Mm-hmm.
Shall see.
Thank you.
I learned everything I know from Barbara.
What? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Terry.
Definitely.